Three men, three brutal crimes. Two states, Florida and Alabama, ready to deliver the ultimate punishment. No appeals left, no second chances, just cold hard countdowns to death. Michael Bell, the man who hunted down the wrong couple in a deadly act of revenge. Geoffrey Todd West, the killer who stalked and strangled a woman in a motel room. Edward Zakrzewski, the father who slaughtered his entire family, his wife, his son, and his 5-year-old daughter, then vanished into paradise. Each of them has a date with the needle. Each of them has a story soaked in blood and betrayal. And by the end of this month, all three could be gone. This is Death Row Diaries, and these are the condemned men Florida will execute in July 2025.
Geoffrey Todd West didn't look like a monster. In fact, to most people, he barely registered at all. He lived in Alabama, quiet, ordinary, the kind of guy you wouldn't remember if you passed him in the grocery store. No criminal record, no violent history, just a man working a regular job, with a deadly plan building beneath the surface. He had a girlfriend. They worked together at a Chevron station. She thought he was just intense, moody maybe, but not dangerous. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Geoffrey had already decided what he was going to do next, and it started with a murder. March 27, 1997, Gadsden, Alabama. It was late, quiet, one of those nights where you can hear your own breath echo inside a gas station. Margaret Parrish Berry, the store clerk, was working the night shift. A friendly woman, local. People knew her, trusted her. That's when Geoffrey walked in. He wasn't there to talk. He was armed with a .45 caliber handgun, and this wasn't random. Court records show he forced Margaret to the floor. She complied. No resistance, no struggle. And then he shot her, point blank, in the back of the head, execution style. He didn't run, he didn't panic. He calmly took the cash and left, leaving Margaret's lifeless body behind the counter. The entire ordeal lasted minutes, but the consequences, eternal. This wasn't just murder, this was intent. Long before that night, Geoffrey had reportedly told people he was planning to take care of business, that he would leave no witnesses. He wasn't panicking after the crime. He wasn't even hiding. According to testimony from his own girlfriend, he showed no remorse. If anything, he seemed satisfied. Even worse, he had told her what he was going to do before they ever stepped into the store. He meant to kill Margaret Berry, not by accident, not in self-defense, but because, in his own words, dead people can't talk. Pause for a second. Do you believe some people are born with that kind of cold calculation? Or does something happen along the way to twist them? Let us know your take in the comments. At first, the case went cold. There were no cameras, no fingerprints, nothing to link anyone directly to the scene. Margaret's murder looked like another tragic unsolved crime until someone cracked under pressure. Geoffrey's girlfriend. Faced with the weight of what they had done, she broke down and confessed. Her statement blew the case wide open. She led investigators to the weapon. She described the planning, the conversations, and even the disturbing calm Geoffrey showed afterward. That confession became the backbone of the prosecution's case. Geoffrey Todd West was arrested, and he never denied it. In 1999, Geoffrey stood trial for capital murder. The evidence was devastating. The motive was chilling. The jury didn't take long. 10 out of 12 jurors voted for the death penalty, the maximum sentence under Alabama law. Even the judge seemed disturbed. During sentencing, the court noted Geoffrey's lack of remorse. His expression remained blank, cold, almost indifferent. He had killed Margaret Berry as if her life meant nothing. And in that courtroom, facing the consequences, he didn't flinch. But even after the sentence, the story wasn't over. Geoffrey filed appeal after appeal. He claimed ineffective counsel. He tried to argue that the killing wasn't premeditated. He even filed for post-conviction relief, saying the jury hadn't fully considered mitigating circumstances. In 2002, his R-32 petition was initially dismissed, but in a surprise turn, Alabama's Supreme Court said the petition was actually timely, based on a loophole in the filing deadline. For a moment, it looked like Geoffrey might get another chance. But it didn't last. In ruling after ruling, the court stood firm. This was a calculated execution. Justice had been served. The death sentence would remain. Then came the bombshell. In early 2025, the state of Alabama announced that Geoffrey Todd West would finally be executed in July 2025. After nearly 3 decades behind bars, his date with death had been locked in. But here's the twist. His execution won't happen by lethal injection. Instead, Alabama will use nitrogen hypoxia, a controversial new method that replaces oxygen with nitrogen until the inmate loses consciousness and dies. It's being marketed as more humane, but many disagree. Critics say it's untested, secretive, potentially painful, and yet the state insists it's the future. What do you think? Is nitrogen hypoxia a step forward in execution methods, or something far more sinister? Drop your thoughts below. Before we end this story, we need to say her name again: Margaret Parrish Berry. She wasn't famous, she wasn't powerful, but she mattered. Margaret was kind, a familiar face to regulars at the Chevron station. She worked hard, she laughed loud, she was loved by her family. And in a moment of cold, calculated violence, her life was stolen, just to make sure a few dollars could be taken without resistance. Her family waited nearly 30 years for justice. They will never stop missing her. Geoffrey Todd West entered that gas station in 1997, knowing exactly what he was going to do. He had no outburst, no panic, no regret. And now, nearly 30 years later, his journey is almost over, with a sealed execution date and a method the world is still trying to understand. The question remains, does time dull justice, or does it make the final moment even sharper? Let us know what you think in the comments. In the early 1990s, tragedy hit the Bell family hard. Michael Bell's younger brother was gunned down in Jacksonville, Florida. Police had suspects, but the case dragged, leads dried up, and to Michael, justice was taking too long. That's when everything changed. One night in December 1993, Bell spotted a familiar car outside a bar. In his mind, that was it. That was the car belonging to the man who took his brother's life. Fueled by rage and a twisted sense of justice, Michael didn't call police. He picked up an AK-47, and within minutes, 2 innocent people would be dead. Have you ever heard of a case where revenge completely backfired like this? Let us know in the comments. We're diving into them all after this video. December 9th, 1993. Outside a nightclub in Jacksonville, Bell pulled up with 2 others. Their mission? Simple: eliminate the man he thought was responsible. Bell stepped out and opened fire. Jimmy West, a 35-year-old man sitting in that car, was shot dead on the spot. Next to him was Tamika Smith, just 22 years old. She clung to life, but died shortly after in the hospital. There was a third woman in the car. She survived by sheer chance. Bell sprayed bullets across the parking lot, into the crowd, then vanished into the night. But here's where it gets even more twisted. Jimmy West had nothing to do with the original murder. He had simply bought the car from the man Bell had been hunting. Michael Bell had killed the wrong man, and an innocent woman paid the price too. When authorities finally caught up with Bell, what they found was even more horrifying. The bar shooting wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the latest in a string of murders. Back in 1989, 4 years earlier, Bell had killed a woman and her 2-year-old daughter. Yes, a toddler. Police believe it was related to a personal dispute, but Bell never confessed. And just months before the 1993 bar shooting, he murdered his mother's boyfriend. That's 5 lives gone, all connected to one man. Yet somehow, he remained under the radar until that one fatal mistake outside the bar. This story gets darker, but if you're into real-life cases that expose the terrifying truth behind headlines, hit that subscribe button now. We've got more stories like this coming every week. Bell was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the bar shooting. But prosecutors began to connect the dots, and soon the other 3 deaths were laid at his feet too. The courtroom was tense. Witnesses took the stand. Prosecutors painted Bell as a cold, calculated killer. But Bell's defense had a different take. They claimed witnesses were pressured, even coerced by investigators. Some statements didn't line up. There were whispers of procedural misconduct. But it wasn't enough. The jury convicted him. The judge sentenced him to death. Over the years, Bell's legal team filed appeal after appeal. One of the most recent came in June 2025, just weeks before his scheduled execution. They claimed a key witness was manipulated into testifying falsely. They pointed to new affidavits, conflicting timelines, and buried evidence. But the court didn't buy it. The judge rejected the request, calling the claims untimely and procedurally flawed. The Florida Supreme Court was contacted, but unless something drastic happens, it's over. Do you believe last-minute appeals should be allowed this close to execution? Or is it too little too late? Comment below. This debate is just heating up. On June 14, 2025, Governor Ron DeSantis signed Bell's death warrant. The execution date was set, July 15th, just after 6 p.m. at Florida State Prison in Stark. He will be the 8th person executed in Florida this year alone. Supporters of the victims say this is justice, decades overdue. But critics argue the case raises questions about mistaken identity, coercion, and whether all of Bell's convictions were truly fair. Still, barring intervention, Bell's time is almost up. Michael Bernard Bell wanted justice for his brother, but he ended up killing the wrong man, and in doing so, he exposed his own hidden trail of blood. Now, 31 years later, the state will have its own form of justice. But one haunting truth remains. Revenge doesn't heal pain. It only creates more victims. If this case stunned you, share this video with someone who believes they know what justice really looks like. And don't forget to subscribe to Death Row Diaries. This is the story of Edward Zakrzewski II, a man now counting down the days on Florida's death row. To the outside world, the Zakrzewskis looked like any other American family. Edward was 29. He served in the U.S. Air Force, stationed at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. His wife, Sylvia, was 28, a devoted mother to their 2 young children, Edward Jr., just 7 years old, and Anna, only 5. They lived in Mary Esther, a quiet community in Okaloosa County. Neighbors saw Edward as disciplined, reserved, and sometimes awkward. Sylvia, by contrast, was bright, social, and active in the community. But behind closed doors, their marriage was crumbling. Sylvia had grown tired of Edward's controlling behavior. She had threatened divorce multiple times, and in private, Edward had already made dark promises. If she ever tries to leave me, I'll take them all with me. Neighbors heard those threats. Nobody believed he'd act on them. They were wrong. It was June 9th, 1994. Edward's 7-year-old son called him at work to tell him something that would seal the fate of their entire family. Mom says she's getting a divorce. That's all it took. Edward left work on his lunch break. He didn't go for food or to clear his head. He went to a hardware store and bought a machete. He didn't panic. He didn't act impulsively. What he did was plan. Court records show he came home during the day and strategically placed a crowbar, a rope, and the machete in different areas of the house. Then he went back to work, then to a college class. He was sharpening a blade at home just hours earlier, and now he was sitting in a classroom, pretending to be normal. It's the kind of cold-blooded patience that separates ordinary people from monsters. That evening he returned home. Sylvia was there. The kids were probably winding down, maybe brushing their teeth or watching cartoons. Zakrzewski told the kids to go watch TV. He then took the crowbar and attacked his wife. He struck her in the head. She fell. He dragged her into the bedroom, where he hit her again harder this time, and wrapped a rope around her neck. She fought, she cried, but she didn't make it out of that room. Then he calmly called his 7-year-old son to the bathroom. Little Edward came, unaware of what had just happened to his mother. His father, his hero, was waiting. Zakrzewski struck him with the machete multiple times. The child was nearly decapitated. Next came 5-year-old Anna. The details of her final moments are mercifully scarce in the court records. What we do know is that Zakrzewski killed her with the same machete. 3 lives, gone in a matter of minutes. Once the bloodshed ended, Zakrzewski didn't stay to grieve. He didn't call the police. He didn't write a note. He cleaned up, packed a bag, and fled. He drove to Orlando. From there, he boarded a flight to Hawaii. In paradise, he began a new life. He used a fake name and found refuge with a deeply religious family who ran a spiritual commune. For 4 months he lived with them, eating their food, sharing prayers, and pretending to be someone he wasn't. They had no idea a triple murderer was sleeping under their roof. Until one night, when the TV changed everything. America was watching. The case had caught national attention. A man who killed his whole family, then disappeared without a trace. It was the kind of story that sent chills through living rooms across the country. And then it happened. The commune family turned on unsolved mysteries, and there he was. His face, his story, his crime. They confronted him the next day. Zakrzewski didn't run this time. He turned himself in, quietly, without protest, like a man who knew the game was over. In 1996, 2 years after the murders, Zakrzewski pled guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. He didn't deny what he did. He didn't fight the charges. The judge called the killings brutal and atrocious, the kind of crime that demanded the harshest possible sentence. Edward Zakrzewski was sentenced to death once for each life he took. He began what would become a decades-long stay on Florida's death row. And for years, the case faded from public memory. But the clock on death never stops ticking. It's now been nearly 31 years since that horrific night in Mary Esther. And in 2025, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed Edward Zakrzewski's death warrant. The date is set, July 31st, 2025, at 6:00 p.m. If it goes forward, Zakrzewski will become the 9th person executed in Florida that year, a number not seen since 1984. Florida is setting a new record: monthly executions, back-to-back death warrants. Michael Bernard Bell, another death row inmate, is scheduled to be executed just 2 weeks before Zakrzewski, and the state shows no signs of slowing down. What makes a man slaughter his own family? Psychologists referred to cases like Zakrzewski's as family annihilators, men who view their wife and children as extensions of themselves. When they lose control through divorce, financial stress, or perceived betrayal, they don't just kill, they erase. In Edward's mind, Sylvia had betrayed him. She wanted to leave, to take the kids, to humiliate him. He made sure none of that happened. And the chilling part? He planned it all without hesitation. He bought the weapons, placed them like traps, and then went to class. He didn't snap. He calculated. Zakrzewski now sits in a cell at Florida State Prison in Rayford, where executions are carried out. The date is creeping closer, July 31st. And unless a last-minute appeal or executive intervention saves him, Edward Zakrzewski's life will end by lethal injection. A man who took everything from his family will finally face the same silence he gave to them. This case isn't just about one man's rage. It's about the terrifying idea that the people closest to us can sometimes become our worst nightmare. Zakrzewski wore a uniform, said prayers, tucked his kids into bed. But when the mask slipped, what lay beneath was pure horror. What do you think? Should a man like Zakrzewski be put to death or rot behind bars for the rest of his life? Comment below. Your thoughts deserve to be heard. Subscribe to Death Row Diaries for more bone-chilling stories from the darkest corners of the justice system. And if you know someone who thinks family men could never be killers, send them this video. Because sometimes the most terrifying monsters live inside the house.